Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, veterans. Today we're going to be talking about tinnitus, one of the primary claims every veteran should have, because I know I have it, and I know most of you do too. And the fact that there's a very important date coming up, the 27th of June. We'll get to that towards the end of the actual brief, so stay towards the end because there's a huge thing that most veterans don't even know about going on, involving the 3M earplug case. It's a benefit that almost every veteran should be applying for, because it's something that pretty much all of us have had issued to us and all of us deal with. During this brief, we're going to be going through a couple of things, such as to describe the key features of tinnitus, to show how tinnitus is a substantial health burden. And trust me, it definitely is, because I know I deal with it on a daily basis. It's one of the lead indicators that I'm about to have one of my famous migraine attacks. And all of the individual things, the noise involved in the actual tinnitus attacks, they lead to loss of hearing. I know that I have problems hearing people all the time just due to the loud ringing and E sound that I get in my ears. It makes communication very difficult. In fact, I'm dealing with it a little bit right now, which is why I'm stuttering a bit. To read the role of hearing loss and tinnitus and to present options for management, generally, these are going to be hearing aids and sound therapy. Those are what work best for me. I don't have the hearing aids yet, mainly because the VA takes forever to issue anything like that. So sound therapy is what works best for me at the moment. Now, what is tinnitus? So tinnitus is that perception of sound with no external source. It's that E sound that you always hear, or that ringing in your ears, could be a buzzing. Potentially could lead to sound hallucinations, not fully formed sounds, and generally can occur in one ear or both ear. Sometimes it's a hissing as well. It can have profound effect on the sufferer. I know for me, it's one of the leading indicators of my migraines, like I've said before. If the tinnitus starts, probably going to have a migraine attack. And I know many of you will probably feel the exact same way. Sometimes it can make you feel anxious, and sometimes it can affect your depression, which I know many veterans suffer from. And there's just a quote from Zager. Now, as far as the features of tinnitus, there's a few potential noise criteria. Onset can be sudden or gradual. Your pattern can be pulsating. One of the ones that I get, intermittent, which means that it starts and then stops and then starts and then stops. Constant, which means it's a straight through. It never stops. You always hear it. I know many veterans that served in OIF and OEF, they definitely have the constant version, and then a fluctuating version, which is like kind of like a wave. Think of like a wave, like it'll become really loud and become very quiet. And that's just throughout the day. Now, I hear in both my ears, stronger in my left side, because that's where my hearing loss is. I'm two-tone deaf in my left ear, as well as have a tinnitus claim and actual percentage through the VA. Now, as far as the loudness, there's a wide range. Like every veteran, depending on their service branch and their MOS, they'll probably hear it louder than others. One of the major things is artillerymen, for instance. So you can tell we are around large guns with a high overpressure. If you are around any of those guns, you definitely have some form of hearing loss. It's basically impossible for you not to. And then I know mine is very loud, very, very loud. Now, quality could be a pure tone, it could be more of a noise, and it could be polyphonic, which means that it's going to adjust over the different levels of tone. Unfortunately, mine's more polyphonic. Like I'll hear multiple different tones. Generally, that happens when I have a fluctuating tinnitus attack. You'll notice that you get all three generally. Now, as far as pitch, it can be very high, high, medium, or low. Now, as far as myself, I know I have a very high pitch. It's literally like someone screaming in your ear. Now, evaluating the tinnitus severity. At sometimes on the extreme, patients suffer so much, it just makes daily living horrible because you'll hear it, it makes it hard to communicate. When it comes on, you'll know that you'll probably end up having some sort of anxiety or depression. Generally, you can end up with headaches, like such as my migraines again. There's just so many things that people that actually suffer with it that they have as secondary effects. Now, as far as it being highly variable, I mean, most patients can cope with it. There's a lot of MOSs that probably do have tinnitus, but it's at such a low level that they can actually cope with it. So it's not really a huge thing for them. Now, there's a lot of burden of tinnitus. I know I get like this gentleman over here in the picture. Now, the scale of the problem, you have 10 to 15% of the general worldwide population that has this, generally around heavy machinery, any explosions, anything that would cause a disruption in the overpressure of the air. That's a lot of what affects the overall inside of the cochlea and the eardrum. Now, this is an estimated 280 million people. Now, as far as veterans, we're talking easily 1.7 million veterans that are probably affected by some version of tinnitus just due to the lack of true protection for your ears. Now, it does cause 1 to 2% of people to have daily living limits, and you have a lot of risk factors. Hearing impairment, as you increase in age, it's not going to get better. So it's something you need to seek help for. If you don't have a tinnitus claim, you need to claim one because it's not going to get better. It's only going to get worse. And I literally went to one of my hearing appointments, not even 4 months ago, and they told me, yeah, you're two-tone deaf and it's only going to get worse. So it's like, great. A lot of us are male, just due to our occupations and things that we're around. We're the most likely people to go around heavy machinery and explosives, military service, things like that. And it's just exposure to noise. Now, this is a growing problem, especially in the elderly population. I know that my grandfather, who served in Vietnam, like, he has tinnitus, among other things. Then my old man, he has the same thing. Definitely a lack of hearing, tinnitus, and some sort of hearing loss. Now, peripheral events that can lead to the actual central neurological changes. So that's another thing, is tinnitus affects your central neurological system, which is terrible because that's actually what causes your anxiety and your depression. But it could be all of your hearing loss, your noise traumas, your ototoxic drugs, and your auditory nerve abnormalities. Now, the central auditory pathway, neuronal abnormalities, if I can speak English today, leads to tinnitus onset and tinnitus persistent. A range of peripheral events can definitely lead to your central neuronal changes. I know this is another huge thing for me, is when it comes on, I know that something else is going to happen, second, third order effects. Now, tinnitus and hearing loss. Most patients with tinnitus have some sort of degree of hearing loss. And like I said, two-tone deaf on the left side. So I know I do. I know you probably do too. 75 to 90% of the patients have it. About 80% have a general hearing loss, have tinnitus. Now, it's one of those disabilities. It's just like a double whammy. It's like you can't communicate, and then on top of it, you can't hear people when they talk. I know this runs into my problems all the time when I'm talking to family members, friends, or even my girlfriend, who, bless her heart, is just dealing with my inability to hear her sometimes. I know it drives her nuts. And then not only that, but yeah, most veterans have some degree. And same statistics, but obviously that goes for like 1.7 million of us. So you should claim this claim. It's one of those 10 percenters, but it leads to you actually getting some sort of medical treatment for your tinnitus that I know most of you probably have. Now, tinnitus and distress, it's a vicious cycle because I know my tinnitus leads to more emotional distress. More emotional distress leads to louder tinnitus. It's generally going to affect you, especially when you're having anxious bouts or you're having some sort, like, for instance, again, migraines. A louder tinnitus leads to a worse migraine, which leads to a worse tinnitus. So it's just one of those vicious cycles that I know every veteran out there deals with. And then not only that, but we've already covered it a few times, tinnitus leads to a bunch of other fun little things. And generally 24 out of 90, which is your 26.7%, have some sort of additional psychological association, which anxiety, most veterans, depression, most veterans, sleep problems, definitely most veterans. That actually all interlinks with tinnitus. It's just one of those things that affects your neurological system. So obviously you're going to have some sort of effect overall. And on the left side, you got some much worse ones, which I mean, it would be more for the severe cases of tinnitus. I know a lot of veterans with PTSD and tinnitus will fall more into that range. And as you can see, depression and anxiety correlate directly with tinnitus. So the more tinnitus, the more likely you are to have some sort of anxiety and depression. It's just natural. It's just how it is. Now, other associated problems, I know mine are majorly sleep problems. I wake up in the middle of the night 4 or 5 times a night, and that's just due to a loud ringing in my ears. Nothing I can do about it. So it's something that I just have to deal with. I've grown pretty adjusted to it at this point, but it definitely has an impact on your overall health. And then that can lead to cognitive impairment because sleep loss leads to cognitive impairment. I know it's something the Army doesn't want to put out there. So it's one of those things. Now, tinnitus management options. There's multiple options. Like I said, my main one is the sound therapy. It helps me, especially 432 hertz. It's one of those individual music levels that actually kind of calms and relaxes, and the tinnitus seems to break up when that happens. There are drugs that you can take, but I don't recommend drugs at any point in time just because of all the negative side effects. And then hearing aids. Hearing aids are one of those things that you literally have to be permanently deaf for the VA to issue. So generally you have to pay for these on your own or have your insurance pay for them. Now, as far as paying for it, once we get to the last slide, or the second to last slide, I'll show you a potential option to get the funding to actually pay for this so that you can have better hearing, so you can have that better communication with your family members, as well as your coworkers and things like that. Now, this is just another slide on the overall help for hearing aids that occurs with tinnitus. So, I mean, if you have hearing aids, it's going to reduce your tinnitus. I know I have one gentleman who applied for the program we're about to talk to, who has hearing aids in both ears, and it helps him with his tinnitus. In fact, it's the only thing that does. And another information graph about hearing aids. Obviously, multiple studies have been done with this. If you have binaural hearing aids, they actually provide a dual benefit. So it's binaural is the both sides of your ears. It actually helps all patients with some sort of tinnitus. Now, fitting the hearing aid was the most frequently reported benefit. So you have to have a specific fitting, which means you have to go to an audiologist. You have to get your ears measured, and you probably are going to have to do it all on your own dime. Now, why do I say that? Well, there's a huge thing going on right now with 3M. I'm working with a company called NSSX. They're actually running individual cases for veterans and active duty who all have some sort of tinnitus and hearing loss. The only requirements are, did you serve between 2003 and 2015? Did you use the 3M dual-sided earplugs? I know I did, because I had them issued at Bullock at Fort Sill, so I know that they were there. We had them, and I had them all the way up until an NTC that we went to in 2015, where they fell out, and I had a MLRS, multiple rocket launch system go off next to me. So it definitely had some sort of overpressure, which impacted my left ear, which is more than likely the reason I have tinnitus and hearing loss. And then obviously the last one, you have to be diagnosed with some sort of tinnitus and hearing loss. Now, it's one of those claims that anyone with those criteria can file, and it's a huge thing because we're running up on a deadline. This major deadline is June 27th. Now, this is the last date that the plaintiffs, 3M, have to be able to file their opposition brief. So if they don't do this, they're going to start paying out of the wazoo for all these individual cases, because this is a mass tort case, which means that each one of the defendants is filed separately by the lawyers, and it actually is going to lead to a much higher settlement than you would see in a standard class action. So if somebody tells you, no, this is stupid, this is a class action, you only get like $3 to $50, that's not true. That's not true at all. And then you're actually going to see a much higher settlement. In fact, June 27th, if 3M does settle this, we're looking at 5-6 figures just in general, based on severity. Now, this is going to be a brief that is going to be filed with the 11th Circuit. If it gets here, this is like the last test in 3M's quiver, like it's last arrow in 3M's quiver. After this point, they're going to have to file each and defend each individually, which is not what they want, because those are averaging around $20 million. So they're going to want to settle this thing before the 27th. So if you're not in now, you need to get in, because once this is done, it's done, and you're not going to be able to get this benefit. You'll still be able to get the 10% hearing loss and tinnitus via the VA, but it's one of those things that you should get in now, because this is not going to last forever. I know I'm in it. So far, the process has been very, very easygoing. You just fill out a simple form using this QR code that's on the page. And I'll also have links on the video. So if you want to click the link that I use and submit your information, I'll make sure that you get hooked up with a good lawyer that actually can do this for you. But remember, June 27th, that's the date. There is nothing else. So if you decide to do it, you have to do it before then. And last thing, I want to say thank you to all the veterans who actually listened to this. Hope you gain something useful out of the overall brief. Now, I'm not a medical expert, so this is not considered medical advice. It cannot be considered any sort of financial advice, and I'm also not a legal expert, so don't take this as legal advice. But there are things out there that can help individual veterans, and I hope that you guys will go ahead and go get a hearing test, get your tinnitus claimed, get your 10% via the VA, and then also apply for this before the 27th of June, which means you might have to go to your doctor personally. I highly recommend this because it could potentially change your life. So all I want to say is thank you again and hope that you got something out of it.